Welcome back once more. This is Sunday edition here on KTN News. In the next 20 minutes or so, we shall be finalizing this conversation of this developing story. Uhuru's new look cabinet. We'll be taking a look at a few talking points, like no woman CS has been retained according to Friday's announcement. And of course, we'll be asking the question of is it safe to say that technocrat cabinet secretaries are not working for Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto. And of course, we'll take a look at the nominees, three nominees to the cabinet as announced by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Let's listen into that.
In addition, and by the authority conferred upon me by Article 152(2), I have nominated and forwarded the names thereof to the Speaker of the National Assembly the following persons: for position of Cabinet Secretary, the Honorable John Munyes, the Honorable Uhuru Yatani, and Mr. Kiraiko Tobiko. For Ambassador to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Mr. Lawrence Lenayapa.
Gentlemen, let me just take that last sentence by the President and see how many politicians are in this. First of all, in the six cabinet secretaries, the six that were retained, we have Charles Keter, who is a politician, we have Najib Balala, who is a politician, and we have Fred Matiang'i, who most of you have agreed that he has been very political and he has brought the Kisi vote a lot. I don't know if Dismas will agree with that. And then we have John Munyes, former Turkana Senator, Uhuru Yatani, former Marsabit Governor. And then we have Kennedy Mbogwa replacing Lawrence Lenayapa as a State House Controller. I mean, a lot of politicians and Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto had indicated that in their first term, that they will resort to technocrats to work in cabinet. Is that fading away, Dismas?
Obviously, that is fading away. But before you look at that, in my view, when you are given the opportunity to serve as a cabinet secretary by President Kenyatta, you'll have yourself to blame if you succeed and then you're not reappointed. Like, for instance, for the case of Professor Judy Wahungu, Mark says that she's delivered. But no, she's winking at a girl in the dark. She may be doing a good job, but she's in the public eye. People do not see that you are delivering. We should be seeing her all over delivering. And there are so many people that you can give examples. For instance, the late Mishuki, when he was appointed minister responsible for transport, without amending any piece of legislation, he delivered superior value. A few minutes later, when Ali Makwere comes into the ministry is as good as dead. So sometimes it depends on the personality holding that office. You could still go back to history and you go to Mr. Simeon Nyachai. Whichever ministry you gave him, he delivered value. Right now, for Dr. Matiang'i, whichever ministry you're going to give him, you deliver value. So for the cabinet secretaries who may have delivered in their performance contracts, maybe who have very exciting handover notes, they have to blame themselves because they've got fellas responsible for communications in their dockets. So if you do a good job and you do not make noise about it, for instance, if it's Amina Mohammed, if it's Adan Mohammed, because people say Adan has delivered very well in industrialization, but who knows what he has delivered if your communication team doesn't go the extra mile. For instance, but again, that again can be negated because when you look at Eugene Wamalwa has been all over Kenya, opening taps everywhere. Kiunjuri has been all over, giving donations. So at some stage, I think there's something more the president was looking at outside performance, maybe in the public space. Right. Because for Eugene Wamalwa, he has been jumping all over from one meeting to another, campaigning in Western Kenya. You saw a few days ago, he invaded. He gets crashed into a meeting and he was told to take a walk. Maybe he wanted to earn some sympathy. So there's a very high chance that the president has got a certain script that he's following, which may not be related to performance. And when you look at President Kenyatta today, now he has to balance three things. Number one, he wants to leave a legacy. So he wants to do some projects so that when he leaves office, people can have a sweet feeling about him. And then the deputy president is interested in essentially having a cabinet, which is essentially a campaign team for 2022. And then we are told there are other stakeholders. There is the effect of Gideon Moi and other stakeholders. So actually the president is working on eggshells, and if he's not very careful, Kenya may get into trouble. Because how do you balance those interests? And what is Wanjiko looking at? Wanjiko right now depending whether it's Wanjiko leading on NASA or it's Wanjiko leaning on Jubilee. The Wanjiko leaning on NASA is looking for electoral justice, saying that the elections of last year were not free, fair, nor credible. There's something going on. Can President Kenyatta create the opportunity to have a conversation with NASA so that we sanitize our systems and maybe have an election in the next 1 or 2 years? While the Wanjiko on the Jubilee side is saying, politics is over, let's settle down and grow the economy. So the president must harmonize all those thoughts so that as a nation, we can make progress. Because if you do not harmonize those interests, 5 years later, we'll be on the same spot and will not be making progress. But let's go to Willie Bet. A few days to the elections, he said that we are going to offer subsidies. And you know, people say that's the best thing in the world. What has happened right now? The prices have gone through the skies, which means that when he was a minister responsible for agriculture, he did not understand his role. He should have known that if you want subsidies to work, you do not subsidize the middlemen. You go on the production side. You go address the cost of fertilizer, the cost of seeds, the cost of implements. So now Willie Bet cannot blame President Kenyatta for being fired or not having been retained because he was given the opportunity, he did not deliver. And as Esmond had indicated, even for Wario, he should have been camping at State House, trying to convince the president to give him a budget to put up those stadia, assuming the budget was not available. And if it was not, the budget was not going to be made available at State House, he should have pitched tents at the National Assembly, where with the Mtava Committee, you know, really lobbying for those allocations. But we don't see that coming up. So, in as much as we don't want to dance on anybody's grave, the ministers who have not been retained, they probably deserve it because they did not bring any political capital to the table.
Mark, in his last term, in his legacy term, as you call it, does President Uhuru Kenyatta need political cabinet secretaries? And not too political, because he had to recall Kiunjuri and Wamalo from running for positions.
Let's take a step back into Kenyan history. First and foremost, we remember that ministers, as they were called then, used to be parliamentarians who were then given a docket within government to run. Now, there were two particular issues with that. Number one is that this guy was looking to re-election. That means that whatever portfolio he had to do something for his village. So if you're in water, there were taps everywhere with running water in your village. So to remove that weight of having to survive politically, cabinet secretaries were made cabinet secretaries without the need of being parliamentarians. But that did not mean that there is no need for them to have political savvy and political competence to do their jobs. And the reason why you need political savviness and political competence to do a cabinet secretary job is, number one, what you're delivering upon is called a party manifesto. That manifesto is a political document. Secondly, the person you're delivering to is the Kenyan public, which votes democratically, which means majority rules. Therefore, whatever you do must be seen to appeal to the majority. And therefore, you need to have the skill to know that while you're working, you need to be able to expose your job, to shine light on what it is that you're doing. And that means, by the very nature of the job, that you're required to have some political savvy and political sharpness to be able to survive in this environment. I can predict for you, in fact, I can almost bet that 3/4 of the cabinet, around 16, 17 members of them, will have past, present, and political gravitas, and sometimes even political futures in the next 5 years. The reason being that, number one, you want to do a good job so that A, you can survive beyond 2022, and B, so that you are able to expose what it is that you've done to your electorate. And that is good for a legacy term. One of the things that we need to remember, and it's very interesting because we've done it even in this show, Kavemba has remembered Kibaki probably because he worked for him. But a lot of the people here, if you asked us what Kibaki did, you'll have to say Thika Highway, you remember 2007 violence, and you remember his accident before he was elected. Because he was one of those people who was very media shy. And that's the issue that happens. You can do the best job, wear the best clothes, but for as long as
you
you're
don't
in your
remember the
bedroom,
economic growth from 2002 to 2000?
but economic growth is a hard thing to explain, because even as we have complained about the Kenyan economy in the last 5 years, it's been growing in the positive 4, 5, 6% all through. So it's an abstract figure. But to be able to be remembered, you need to pull a Barack Obama. It does not matter how well you dress. For as long as you're in the bedroom, you're not winning any beauty contest.
All right.
That's how it's going to work.
Hesbon.
Well, I don't think you need politicians, especially politicians who have contested and lost in the cabinet. But what you need is people in cabinet who can navigate the political course and address issues, that politicians will always interrogate. Because politics is about how resources are distributed. And therefore, any cabinet secretary who is in charge of anything will have to be subjected to the political drama. But I tend to believe that when Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto came into office, that is what they envisaged. They thought they would have technocrats who would be in a position to navigate the political waters and deliver. But when that failed, they realized that they have individuals who cannot perform and allay the political negativity around what they are doing. So they resorted to having politicians, because politicians can then perform and still know how to handle this. And again, you realize that there are cabinet secretaries who are not even politicians. Like Matiang'i is not a politician. But I think he has been in cabinet portfolios that lend themselves, to the public domain. And he has mastered the act of responding to any challenges within this public domain. You look at CS Amin Abdallah. I think she's not a politician, But Amina Mohammed. But she has navigated that, and credit to Monica Juma, who has been behind the scene, doing the bulk of the work and ensuring that whatever the cabinet secretary has to navigate with in the public domain makes a lot of sense. So to me, I don't think it is necessary, but credit to President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, William Ruto. There are a few politicians that they promise they will find jobs for, like the former governor for Marsabit, Yatani. I think it is good if you have a leadership that commits to something, and they do. I also want to believe that they'll do the same to cabinet secretaries that they had promised, like Mwangi Kiunjuri and Eugene Wamalo.
All right. Mutinda?
Now, I had forgotten to mention that actually Eugene did justice to shaping perception of someone who's been working. You remember there was the issue of the water towers in the water tunnels in Murang'a, and it had been politicized, and he was on the ground trying to give the proper version. He's been all over launching big water projects. In Cumberland, Thwake Dam stands out. It's actually going to be the biggest of its type. The other day he was in Kirinyaga, and as far as giving the perception of someone working, I think Eugene has done that. We do not know what details the president has, but from out here as the public, I think that is one minister that you have to commend for doing his job in terms of giving the Kenyans a feel that your water issues have someone in charge who's trying to address them. Now, you've mentioned about the three that have been brought on board. You remember sometime in Marsabit, there was a presidential campaign rally that actually turned very, very chaotic. Mm-hmm. And these are some very volatile areas, and you remember the late Godana was from that area, and actually even when he met his demise, they were flying for some peace meetings. So these are very sensitive areas, and I think in terms of inclusivity, in terms of ensuring that some of these situations don't end up getting out of hand, he's done very well to bring that gentleman on board. Munyes is, he did well. You remember there was the immediate former speaker. I always used to ask people, where is Ekwe Thuro in all these campaigns? At least Munyes came in and filled that void very well. And I believe he's competent in his own right. It's not the first time that he's making it into cabinet. I think this is going to be the second time. I remember the Grand Coalition cabinet, he was a member.
Does
and
the entry of Munyes mean it's a done deal for Ekwe Thuro for any appointment?
Of course, not in the cabinet. There is no way they are going to be two. Considering the constitution, that we have to have a maximum of 22.
Regional balance.
It's regional balance. When you look at it that way, then I don't think Ekwe Thuro is going to be at that level. He might get some other appointment, but not in terms of not at the cabinet level. So the issues of inclusivity, you've seen the MA. you remember very well that the late Nkaiseri was the only CS, and now Tobiko has been brought on board. It's also important for people to note that Tobiko had an 8-year term, which was almost now coming to an end.
All right, I want to take, we have only 5 minutes to take a look at some politics in all this, and that is the absence of Deputy President William Ruto. He has been, the two of them have always been together while making public or national announcements. In fact, in 2013, they were wearing matching ties, no jackets. But he was nowhere to be seen at State House Dismas. Is there trouble in paradise? Or are we reading too much into it?
Well, you know, unless you go again through Ruto's diary to establish why he was not president.
Well, he was in the country.
Yeah, but going using history, the two are together even in very, you know, very
exactly.
Small, for lack of a better word, small function. I recall they were together even when Mutua was establishing some abolition facilities. They were, you know, they were opening that facility together. But to me, what you need to do is look at the body language of President Kenyatta. For the first time, he says I. In the past, it has always been, we. And I think President Kenyatta is reminding all and sundry in Kenya that while the deputy president is Ruto, the buck stops with him. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You would have run as a joint ticket, but the buck stops with one individual. If anything goes wrong in Kenya today, people will be looking at President Kenyatta. And what you note of is that the people associated with the deputy president have been missing in action. Apart from Dwal, who spoke yesterday, but the rest of his kitchen cabinet, the rest of his brigade, and I don't want to use the word sycophants because that one may sound demeaning, but they will not come out to say anything, which means that there is a disruptive agenda somewhere, that there's somebody who's looking at the cabinet and saying, President Kenyatta, the cabinet you're putting together is supposed to deliver on your big 4 items. Well, another person is saying, wait a minute, the cabinet you're supposed to be putting together is supposed to be my campaign team, essentially. And then maybe you have now other stakeholders, interested parties like Gideon Moi. But when you look at the cumulative aspects, in my view, what President Kenyatta is supposed to be doing, because he's not going to be seeking for election again, is to ask himself right now, what works for Kenya? He's supposed to put together a cabinet which is going to reduce the cost of unga. Now unga is going up every single day. He's supposed to put together a cabinet for national cohesion. And more important, it's supposed to listen what NASA is saying. Because NASA merely requesting for a meeting. It must listen to them and address electoral issues.
All right, Mark, what could be happening? Could it be that William Ruto has delayed submitting his lineup, or maybe some of his names have been rejected already?
I would not say that because, remember, we argued that the cabinet secretary in charge of finance was a Ruto guy. The minister of energy was considered a Ruto guy. And they are substantively, they are among the 6 that were confirmed. So we cannot say that Ruto's absence is inferred that he has no say within the cabinet, because if history is anything to go by, his people are still within cabinet. That being said, it must also be understood that the president and how the Constitution envisions the appointment of cabinet, the president does indeed have ultimate say. The presence of William Ruto physically there never meant that the president is not the president. And let's remember that unlike the previous term where it was a coalition government between TNA and URP, this is Jubilee. And therefore this cabinet is a Jubilee cabinet. And William Ruto is a Jubilee candidate because when Kenyans voted, they voted both for Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. So I may not go so far as to say there's trouble in paradise, and I can say there are signs that there is a lot of inclusivity of the people who've been known to be pro William Ruto within the cabinet.
All right, let me do the speculating, being the devil's advocate. Hesbon, could it be the presence of the Baringo Senator Gideon Moi and his influence, growing influence in the Jubilee brigade, and maybe he has some influence on the names that should be, could that be a possible disruption?
I think it is a perceived possible disruption, so to speak, and that is what people are talking about, that there is some mutiny between the former URP and former TNA camp, which to me personally I think is going to work well for the Deputy President William Ruto. Actually, from what I said, I think his absence is a good thing for him. Over the last few years, I think he has been a very good understudy. He supported President Uhuru Kenyatta to the hilt in 2002. They lost. He supported Raila Odinga to the hilt, even when Raila Odinga was under attack when his name was being brought into the maize scandal. I think Deputy President William Ruto, who was then his lieutenant, was very categorical that don't bring the Prime Minister into this. And you get a sense in which that this is a deputy, and in every sense that he has served as a deputy, he has served the master well.
Right.
It has served him right, and to give Uhuru total control, I think, would work for him come 2022.
Thank you. Mutinda, is there trouble, or are we reading too much?
I think we are reading too much because it's still very early. And one thing that has come out and which I would want to repeat is the fact that unlike in the previous government, which was a coalition government between URP and TNA, they had actually deposited a document with the registrar of political parties.
Right.
So it might then have seemed to be insensitive or impolite for the president to take some of these decisions alone. But as at now, Jubilee is one team. It has been working as one team, and it has actually brought on board other very many players besides TNA and URP. So probably that might be the most logical explanation to what is happening, unlike before, because before it was clear that this is a coalition of two parties, and that is why it was important that it appears to be so. So that is probably why they were very keen on ensuring that that picture it comes out. But this time around, it's one team that is Jubilee, and whenever they
tweeted about the cabinet changes.
Probably with time he will. By the time we see the complete list,
right.
and like we said, there are people who are known to be allied to him,
right.
and they've been appointed. That means that there must have been some input from him.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. That's where we leave it. Tinda Kavemba, political strategist, political analyst, Hesbon Owila, and Mark Bichach, and political risk analyst, Dismas Mokwa. Thank you for joining us for our first show of the year. We hope to do this for the next all Sundays in 2018. We shall be here trying to dissect the issues for you, the governance and political issues, the biggest political stories in the country, trying to lay the week for you.